5. The Tao doesn't take sides, it gives birth to both good and evil. The Master doesn't take sides, she welcomes both saints and sinners. The Tao is like a bellows, it is empty yet infinitely capable. The more you use it, the more it produces. The more you talk of it, the less you understand. Hold on to the center. The story. In the waning years of the Zhou dynasty, within a walled estate where lotus ponds reflected pavilions of lacquered red and gold, there lived a young princess named Shang Xinqi. She was the third daughter of the House of Shang, a family whose influence stretched across 4 provinces, whose ancestors had advised emperors, whose name was spoken with reverence in every court and village. The weight of that name pressed upon Xinqi like silk robes soaked in rain. From the moment she could walk, as she was taught that a princess must be seen as virtuous, she must speak with perfect grace, she must show benevolence to servants and peasants alike, so that all would say, "The house of Shang raises daughters worthy of heaven." And so Xinqi performed. She rose before dawn to practice calligraphy until her characters were flawless. She memorized poetry, reciting verses at banquets until her throat ached. She visited the sick in nearby villages, distributing rice and medicine, while scribes followed behind, recording her good deeds for the family chronicles. She smiled until her face felt like a painted mask. She spoke kind words until they tasted like ash on her tongue. The people adored her. "Princess Xinqi," they whispered, "is a living blessing." But alone in her chamber at night, as surrounded by silk screens painted with cranes and mountains, she wept without knowing why. Her chest felt tight, as though something essential had been wrung out of her, drop by drop, until nothing remained but the shape of a girl. One autumn evening, when chrysanthemums bloomed in the courtyard and the air carried the faint sweetness of osmanthus, Xinqi wandered into the eastern garden where her grandmother sat alone. The old woman was considered eccentric by the family, a widow who had refused to remarry, who spent her days not managing household affairs but sitting in stillness, watching the carp drift through the pond, saying almost nothing at all. Xinqi knelt beside her on the cool stone. "Grandmother," she whispered, "this granddaughter's heart grows heavy as autumn frost. I have done all that virtue demands, and I have poured myself out like water from a vessel. Yet I feel as though my spirit fades with each passing moon. Why does my soul feel as though it wanders far from home?" Her grandmother did not turn. She continued watching the water, where golden and white fish moved in slow, effortless circles. At last the old woman spoke, her voice soft as wind through ancient pines. "Child, have you observed the fish beneath the water's surface?" Xinqi gazed down. "Yes, grandmother, I see them. Do they labor to earn the water's embrace? Do they strive and strain so that the pond might carry them?" The question lingered in the cool air. "No," Xinqi replied slowly. "They move as though movement were their birthright. The water receives them without judgment." Indeed, her grandmother's eyes remained fixed on the drifting shapes. The water does not choose which fish to lift higher because its scales gleam brighter, nor does it let another sink for being plain. It holds all equally, without preference, without exhaustion. This is the way of heaven and earth. They do not strive for benevolence, they simply are, and in being they sustain the 10,000 things. Xinqi felt her throat tighten. "Then what must I do, grandmother? How does one simply be?" The old woman was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke again, her words measured like drops of ink upon rice paper. "When you were a child, you loved to dance. Do you remember? Before the tutors came, before the lessons in propriety and performance, you would dance alone in the moonlight, and your movements flowed like water finding its way downhill. Shinzi's eyes grew distant, while she had nearly forgotten those nights. Tell me, her grandmother continued, when a dancer thinks of every step, when she labors to appear graceful, when her mind chatters endlessly about the position of her hands and the angle of her feet, what becomes of her? She becomes stiff, Shinzi murmured. Her movements grow forced. One can see the effort upon her face like cracks in porcelain. And when a dancer empties herself, when she releases all thought, all striving, all desire to be seen as graceful, when she holds only stillness at her center and lets the music move through her like wind through an empty corridor, Shinzi closed her eyes. She could almost feel it, that forgotten freedom. Then she becomes grace itself. She does not perform grace, she embodies it. So it is with virtue, her grandmother said. In turning at last to meet her granddaughter's gaze, her eyes were deep and clear, impartial as the autumn sky. You have filled yourself with 10,000 words, 10,000 gestures, 10,000 thoughts of how a virtuous princess must appear. You have left no emptiness within, and so your spirit has no room to breathe, no space through which the Tao may flow. A tear traced down Shinzi's cheek. How do I empty myself, grandmother? Cease your endless speaking, cease your endless doing. Return to the stillness at your center, the stillness that existed before your name, before your duties, before the world taught you to perform. The old woman placed a weathered hand upon her granddaughter's. The sage does not strive to be benevolent. She simply moves according to her nature, like the dancer who has forgotten she is dancing. Hold fast to your center, child. From that emptiness, all true grace is born. The princess sat in the garden long after her grandmother had retired. The moon rose, pale and full, reflected perfectly in the still pond. The fish continued their circles, unbothered, unhurried. For the first time in years, Shang Xinzi did not rehearse tomorrow's words. She simply breathed. The interpretation. Laozi's teaching in chapter 5 cuts to the heart of Shinzi's suffering. Heaven and earth do not perform benevolence. They simply operate according to their nature. The straw dogs treated with reverence before the ritual and discarded after remind us that the Tao does not cling to outcomes or appearances. It gives without attachment. Shinzi had become a living straw dog, adorned, displayed, exhausted by the performance of virtue. She had forgotten that true goodness does not announce itself. It does not require an audience. The grandmother's teaching about the dancer reveals the deepest truth. Emptiness is not weakness. It is the source of inexhaustible grace. When we fill ourselves with words, with striving, with the need to be seen, we become stiff and brittle. But when we empty ourselves and hold fast to the center, we become vessels through which the Tao moves effortlessly. Too many words hasten failure. Hold fast to the center. The center is stillness. The center is the quiet place within where no performance is needed, where grace flows naturally like water finding its way home. The modern practice. How do we in our own lives return to the center? First, release the need to be seen as good. Social media has turned virtue into performance. We broadcast our kindness, our charity, our enlightened opinions, and in doing so, we exhaust ourselves chasing validation. Practice invisible goodness. Help without posting about it. Give without telling anyone. Let your virtue exist without witnesses. This is the way of heaven and earth. Second, embrace strategic silence. You do not need to have an opinion on everything. You do not need to fill every pause with clever words. In meetings, in relationships, in your own mind, practice restraint. The dancer who thinks too much becomes stiff. The one who empties herself becomes grace. Guard your emptiness. Speak only when your words improve upon silence. Third, stop performing for your own mind. Much of our exhaustion comes not from external demands, but from the internal audience we imagine is always watching. Release it. You do not need to justify your rest. You do not need to narrate your worth. Simply be. Move through your day like a dancer who has forgotten she is dancing, without commentary, without clinging, without trying to impress the stones. When you hold fast to your center, you become inexhaustible, not because you do more, but because you finally stop trying so hard. This has been Chapter 5 of the Dao De Jing. In the next video, we will explore the 6th chapter and put everything into a story and simple interpretation for daily lives. Click on the next video if you want to find out more about the philosophy of Dao De Jing.